Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on working with children and their caregivers. My name is Evgenia Generalova, and I'm Knowledge and Communications Manager for Child Protection Hub based in Budapest with Terra Zones. And before I give the floor to our speaker, Benita Winchester, I would like to give you a very brief overview of this platform in case it's the first time you are using Adobe. So as you might have noticed, your microphones will be muted. So if you want to communicate, write any comments or ask questions, please use the chat that you can see on the right. Can you please let me know now in this chat if you can hear me well? Wonderful. Thank you very much. Good. Also, I would like you to pay attention to the polls that we are going to have during this webinar. You see one of them on your screens now. Could you please take a second to answer the question? Wonderful. Thank you. We will have a few more polls like this during the webinar. Please pay attention. In case you lose the sound at some point, the first thing you should check is that your microphone icon is green. You can find it on the top black bar now. And also next to it, you can see an icon of a man with a raised hand. Please use it if you want to share any emotions or suggestions, like to agree or disagree or ask the presenter to speak louder or anything like this. Please feel free to use it. And now I would like to give the floor to the speaker, Denitsa, and give me a second, I will put her presentation on. And Denitsa, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evgenia. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. The topic for today is working with children and their their caregivers. We're talking about common challenges and their solutions. My name is Benita Winchester. I would like to share a few words to introduce myself. My education is primarily in human development and family science. I have a doctorate degree completed in the United States. I'm also a psychologist. I have a license in marriage and family therapy. And for the past 11 years, I have been working with children with different kinds of problems, a lot of runaway and homeless kids, also working with drug addicted parents with children in their care, a lot of foster children. For the past few years, I've been working as a director of a drop-in center for homeless youth, again in Ohio. And this is where my experience comes from, working with this kind of population. And I'm hoping that today sharing some of my experiences and knowledge gained from this experience would be helpful for you as well. For that purpose, I was going to ask you if you have any questions. Please ask them, even if it's during the presentation. Although we have planned for a questions and answers time at the end of the presentation, I would be more than happy to address some of the questions as they come, depending on their content and the time. Maybe that would make the conversation a little bit more lively and interesting for everyone involved. Why we're talking about caregivers? Well, I include, at least in my mind, parents are included in the category of caregivers, but many times children live with caregivers that may not be their biological parents. Nonetheless, it's important to include the primary, the most important people that are in the life of the child into the conversation about the child. So whenever I say caregivers, I mean parents as well. So who can benefit from this webinar? Hopefully everyone who works with children and who is involved in the system, social system where they meet children either with or without their parents. My belief is that in order to be productive, in order to be helpful to the children, we have to include the caregivers. This is probably the common theme that runs through the whole webinar for today. So could you please put on the next poll? This is one of our polls. I would ask everyone to quickly type keywords to answer the question. I would like to know more about the context in which you hope to apply the information from today's webinar, because this is going to help me understand a little bit better where you might be coming from and how to adapt the information to better serve your interests. I can see some of the answers coming already. I'll give you a few more minutes to get some more answers. I can see quite a wide variety, which is great. Um, well, maybe I don't know what would be a good time. Can you please help here if you have a little bit more experience knowing when might be a good time to close the call and continue? Thank you. So we're moving to the next slide. So what are the symptoms? This is a very important part, kind of a foundation of this topic. Just to clarify, the way I see the symptoms, and this is probably coming from my training as a systemic therapist, the way I see each symptom is this is the symptom of the system. It's not a symptom of a child. So, for example, if we have a child that has some kind of maybe mental health problems, or frequently we have children with behavioral problems, even if it's a health issue, all those symptoms I see as symptoms of the system. They simply manifest in the child, but there's something going on in the entire system that includes the primary people in child's life. So, for example, parents or foster parents or whoever is involved. Therefore, the best way to intervene is to actually address the entire system. There has to be a continuation from one system to another. For example, if we work with a child, let's say in a center, maybe some kind of program that helps troubled children. There's no way to intervene if we're not involving the parents. Maybe the child is going to do great in our program. Maybe it's even an educational program. But if there's no continuation between the work that we do with the child during the time when we have them in our care and the process that is happening in the home of that child, the work that we do is going to be either partial or irrelevant to the life of the child. Therefore, involving the parents is crucial to the success of our efforts. So what happens if the caregivers are not involved? And they could be disinvolved or not cooperate for multiple reasons. But if that happens, then we have the discrepancy between the systems and the child would continue having those problems or symptoms that we're trying to alleviate. This is time for the next poll. I would ask again to post it again. The question is, how frequently do you encounter problems with parents and caregivers? Kind of a brief poll just to choose the one that applies to your situation. Okay, great. Thank you. So what to do? First step would be find out who is involved in child's life. Remember, our goal here is to involve as many parents as possible. Of course, it's really easy to blame and judge the parents. I have seen a lot of people who have their best intention to be helpful to the children, but when we work with the children only, we see only one side of the story. Of course, their parents involved that might have done something that seems wrong, or when seeing the symptoms of the child, it's easy to start seeing some maybe even inappropriate behaviors or some let's say harmful behaviors on the side of the parents, but it's very important to start looking on the other side as well to understand what is happening. Because if we don't do this, if we don't involve the parents, the child is going to suffer. So the first step would be to find out who is involved in child's life. Sometimes these are the biological parents, but it could be grandparents, uncle, aunt, someone else. Then involve them, engage them at the beginning in your conversation, facilitate interactions with us, with the child. Another thing would be to model healthy behaviors. So, for example, during the interaction, maybe we can invite them to the facility where we work with the child, or another thing we can do is do a home visit if this is a possibility, depending on the context, and model healthy behaviors. Offer support. The support could be emotional, it could be through some kind of resources, maybe there's some problems that might be helpful to these people. One thing that I have noticed is that usually families that are in need, families that are more severely troubled, usually have needs that are way beyond just the emotional part. I have worked with a lot of homeless families, and what tends to happen is those parents live with a lot of stress in their lives, and if we help them with some of the stress that might be coming from financial issues or let's say even finding a place to live or resources that they need for their own health or something else that they find important in their life, then they would have more emotional and actual tangible, resources such as time and attention to be able to help their child. Here I have a picture to illustrate what I'm talking about. So these are a mom and a child in the principal's office, and the mom says, well, he doesn't do his homework and he's disruptive in class. Okay, so what's your point? This is a good example of a parent who's having a hard time acknowledging the problem and taking any responsibility for a solution. And almost everyone who has worked with children or young people have encountered similar conversations with parents. So why is this happening? What is going on with the parent? Why this kind of situation is happening? Here I want to share a story with a client of mine. This was years ago. A woman who was in a program for drug rehab. She was in cocaine, and I was doing home-based therapy with her. She had two kids in her care. The boy was probably about 16 years old, and he was slightly developmentally delayed, but still going to a regular school. The girl was a little younger; she was 9. And the mom was using cocaine on the weekends, but during the week she had a regular job. It was paid per hour, but still she was working full time. And then she was also going to school for a nursing degree. And when I visited the house, one of the first sessions, we were talking about their family, and I'm asking the children and the mom, what is it that they would like to see different in their family? And mom talked about how she wanted her kids to listen a little bit more to her, to be doing what she says, typical parent stuff. And of course, this is just very briefly kind of introductory thing. And the children started talking about how they would like for their mom to spend more time with them. They said that they would like to be able to watch maybe a movie once per week with her, or do something else together, at least once per week. At which point the mom got really, really angry. She started screaming almost hysterically, saying things like, well, what do you want from me? I have provided for you a house that has food. It's safe here. You have TV each one of you has TV in your room. What else do you want from me? How do you dare to ask for more? And to a middle class person, this typically sounds pretty bad. We're used to think about the time with our children as something that is almost sacred, something that is almost a gift for the parent. And yet we have this mom who refuses to do so, and she's actually angry about it. And then what turns out to be the case, then, the conversation continues and the mom started sharing eventually her own story. She told us how when she was little, she was barely able to walk when she remembers her mom being a drug addict. Her mom was on heroin, and was bringing all kinds of men in the house who were having sex with the mom, but also the mom would sell this girl, 5, 6 years old girl. She would sell her in exchange for the drugs. And a little later, when she got older, the other thing is the girl was also supposed to be cleaning the house after those people, and almost used as a maid in the house. And then when she got a little bit older, the only time her mom would spend with her was the time when they were using drugs together. So the mom would teach her how to go and prostitute so she can get heroin, and the two of them can use it together. And from this experience, all she remembers is how unsafe it was in the house. There was no food, no safety. She was raped. She was beaten up by these people and by her mom, who was drugged. And in comparison to her own experience, what she was doing seemed like a really good parenting. She had in her mind that she has done all that she could to keep her children safe. She would never, as a parent, she would never bring any men in the house, no matter what. At some point, she was actually addicted to heroin, but she had two open heart surgeries because of the infections from the needles. And after the second surgery, because of her children, she felt that this wasn't safe, and she needed to do something. And her solution was, because she couldn't simply stop all drugs because of the emotional trauma that she decided to switch to cocaine because it was a safer drug and she can continue taking care of her children while still losing some. And yet she was in the rehab program trying to quit even if she can. It was a very heartbreaking story for me, but it's something that I still remember because um, judging from what we see sometimes is a very different story from the story that the person experiences. You know, when you think about um, oh, I can see someone who is having trouble with the sound. I'm sorry. Let's see if I can turn the microphone a little bit louder. Um, what about now? Is this better? Okay, good. I'm glad we addressed this. Okay, so going back to my story, actually back to the slide. The story is an illustration of why it was important to talk to the parents, why it's important to hear their side of the story, and what can we do. Many times, the perception is that the parent does not care. Most of the time, parents do care. Um, in truth, I have encountered parents who don't, but this is probably a fraction of a percent. So the chance to encounter this is really, really slim. However, there are a lot of parents that appear that they do not care, but this is because of their defense mechanisms. For example, first step, it would be difficult for most parents to accept that something might be wrong. Um, this cannot be true. Somehow, my child cannot possibly have these problems. Maybe those people who work with the child are wrong. Maybe they just misunderstood. Maybe they just don't know their work, and this is why it's happening. Just because I cannot possibly imagine that this kind of problem can happen in my own family. Another issue is guilt after the acceptance. If my child is having issues, then I must have done something wrong. And then also I have all these memories in the past when I have done things that I'm not very proud of. I think every parent that I've ever met has admitted or has encountered moments when they have done something. Maybe they were so angry they yelled at their child and then later regretted. Maybe they had a moment when they just couldn't control their emotions and did or said something that they knew was wrong but couldn't stop themselves. So if my child is having problems, maybe they're due to those moments when I was not the perfect parent. Another one is shame. That means I'm a bad parent. I simply couldn't do for my child what other people do. Lack of control is a big one. Um, if this is happening, it means I cannot control the situation. Something is happening and I have no awareness of it, and now I don't seem to be able to control it. Fear, what is going on to happen? Um, if this has happened without me being able to control it. How is this going to turn out in the future? Is there a cure? Is there help available? Is my child going to be okay? Hopelessness, helplessness. Well, if I'm not able to do well, then maybe there's no hope. Maybe things are just going to get worse as time goes by. And as my child is growing, maybe other problems are going to surface. Um, and then other personal problems, what I mean is there are all kinds of issues that people encounter in their lives. For example, people may have financial problems, they may have personal problems, let's say with their partners or with some important losses in their life. There could be mental health issues. I have worked with a lot of drug addicted parents, parents who might be in jail or who have severe mental health issues. They would like, no, they actually would love, and for them it's very important to keep their children. It's very important to continue having their children in their care, but they do have mental health issues. What is there for them to do? How can they keep their child? They don't trust other people, but yet they know they have issues themselves. And it's hard to, to be able to work with all of the stress at once. Sometimes because of the personal problems, they simply haven't noticed that something was going on with their child. Moving to the next slide. This is kind of a, I don't know, I don't even think it's funny. Ever had a job where you had no experience, no training, no, you weren't allowed to quit and people's lives were at stake? That's parenting. Kids don't come with manuals. Sometimes it's easy, but most parents who have more than one child know that the same approach does not work for all children, and many times it's a matter of fit between the parent and the child, but also external circumstances. Parenting is difficult, and we know that certain things are important, but it's really hard to know exactly what to do from moment to moment. This is a good time for the next poll. Evgeny, could you please put it up again? Here we're asking, from your experience, what have you found helpful for parental engagement? What I mean with this question is, when you work with parents, is there any little secret or trick or something that you're using in your practice that you find to be helpful? Mm. I can see a very nice answer here saying it's even having personal time for their problems. Yeah, that seems to be my experience as well. Having the time to build a relationship with them, absolutely. Persistence, not giving up at the first hurdle, absolutely. These are very, very important things. Showing that additional efforts in professionals is giving results, and the additional efforts will do the same. Yeah, yeah, these are great answers. They're consistent with my experience as well. Well, maybe we can close the poll and move on. Ah, here's another answer. Being open for discussion with them and with understanding, absolutely. They're human beings like everyone else, and their fears, their insecurities, fear resistance, all of this can be overcome with attention. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, Maybe we can move on and close the call. Thank you. Okay, so how to talk with the parent. Uh, I think what I have on this slide is very similar to some of the answers that we got so far. Ask questions and listen. Ask them about their experiences. Have they noticed the problem? What kind of problem? What have they tried so far? What worked? What didn't work for them? How do they feel about this problem? Do they perceive it as such? Because it's hard to expect from someone else to have a similar response if they don't perceive the problem the way we do. So being able to get on the same page with the parent is important, and then to figure out what is it that they have to say about it. Be sensitive. Remember that there are always two sides to each story. Maybe we know about an event that has happened in the life of the child, but we don't know what really has happened. Mm. Let them know that your goal is to help the family. This is super important. Sometimes it may seem obvious, at least from the perspective of someone who works in social services, that we are there to help the whole family, to help the children, but it may not be clear to the parents, not because they don't know it, but maybe because they don't assume it immediately. Maybe they just forget that this might be the case. It's super important to remind them in any way we can that we're there to help the whole family. Acknowledge, show understanding, acknowledge their trouble, acknowledge their own pain and struggle with whatever is happening with the parent or the family as a whole. Show understanding of their problem. Explain the severity of what you're seeing. Explain the way you interpret the events or the symptoms or whatever you're seeing with the child. Maybe they just don't understand it. Maybe they just don't understand the seriousness of the situation or the complications or the potential risks. Be patient and remain calm. Whenever you encounter resistant parents, this is just a matter of you being patient and calm and understanding and acknowledging. Sometimes it takes a little longer, but eventually you'll be able to get through that resistance and see the other side. But the only way to talk to people like this, to even sometimes parents might be aggressive, they might be actually attacking you because you're the bearer of the bad news. Still, remain calm and patient. Practice assertiveness. If there's something that needs to happen, maybe there is a particular thing that has to happen, be assertive about it. Those things that do not, those things that have to happen that do not allow for any more time to wait will have to be enforced with assertiveness. That means to be persistent and yet respectful. Give hope. Another important thing. Maybe the parent would understand what is happening with the caregiver, but they will be able to accept it and they will be able to cooperate better if they have hope. Also, they can be less stressed out if they have hope. Mm. And then offer additional resources. I think here's the time to share another story. This is another mom on drugs. She was on cocaine. And as I started working with her, part of the program that we were doing was to offer help with whatever the client wanted. She had a teenage girl in her care, and the girl was already raped with some people down the street because she didn't have adequate supervision because the mom was on cocaine. And I started working with the mom on some things related to food stamps and some free food resources for her. And I noticed that she was able to read, but if she was reading the document, she couldn't possibly understand what it meant. So she can say the words even out loud that were on the sheet of paper, but she couldn't understand the meaning. She would ask me to read the document to her so that she could write the answers to. We're talking about the application, the forms of the application. So from there, I noticed and took her for traumatic brain injury testing. Turned out that this person, this mom, years ago was struck by lightning, and later she was also hit with a stone in the head. And she had traumatic brain injury, but she didn't know it because to her it appeared that she was the same person, but some of the functions of her brain were no longer useful to her. Then once they discovered the problem, she went through a special program where they trained her how to compensate for those difficulties that she was having. And within 4 to 6 months, she stopped drugs completely and was able to actually get a job, find stable housing for herself and her child, and their family stabilized significantly. The reason I'm sharing the story is because I want to make the point that sometimes we don't really know what is happening, and the other person, the parent, doesn't know either. It might be useful to kind of look around and see if there's anything else that we can offer that would be helpful. It may not be directly related to the upbringing of the child, but it's still very important. And when we move to the next slide, another important thing, what not to do. Do not assume, no matter what you see happening, do not assume that you know why or how this is happening in the situation. Ask questions. Don't blame or judge. I've worked with moms who have sold their children for drugs, and then I can see the pain to which they go when they realize what has happened once they sell it up. Um, it's just a heartbreaking situation. It's a horrible human condition, but it's human nevertheless. And it's very important to start seeing the situation from both sides. Don't blame, don't judge. These people do not sell their children because they're bad people. They do it because they have been abused themselves or they have been through something in their life which enables them to be adequate parents. And these are severe situations, but of course they apply to things that are way more mundane for parents. Don't use sarcasm. It's kind of hurtful and doesn't help. Don't argue, don't threaten, don't disrespect or interrupt the people. And maybe one of the most important ones, don't ever badmouth the parent in front of the child. No matter what the parent has done or said, don't do it in front of the child because this is going to make matters worse. And of course, the opposite. Don't badmouth the child in front of the parent because, again, not helpful. Okay, I'll try to be closer. I'm sorry, closer to the microphone. I don't know if this is going to help and not move my head. Maybe that would be more helpful. These are a couple techniques that I have found helpful during 4 interactions with parents. Of course, number 1 is listen. A good technique would be simple reflection. That means to listen to the person and kind of summarize what they have said. Their words, just give them back to them. Tell them what it is that you have understood from what they told you. That helps the person to continue talking and take you to a place in the conversation, to a topic where they would like to go. It also shows understanding that you are attentive and listening to their words. The alternative the contrast to this would be if you take their words and tell them how maybe how you feel about this or some kind of value judgment of what they're saying. Um, the technique is really to just stay with only with those things that they are saying so that you can allow them to open up and talk about what they would like to say. Another one is visit the home if possible because um, uh, taking the child out of their environment is easy. But also, bringing a parent into a quiet office room with a child is easy. It's difficult to do it in a chaotic house or a place where um, the environment is unpredictable. So in order to help them, it's more useful to do it at a place where they feel at home, so you can adjust to their own environment. Also, it gives you context, gives you a perspective of what is really happening. And then I have some ideas for therapeutic interactions in the case that you actually have a chance to interact with both child and parent. You can use some therapeutic games. Some examples are life stories and Ungame. Both of these are available in the United States. I'm not sure what might be an equivalent in Europe, but the two games are available in English on Amazon. Personally, I really love life stories because they can be used with children that are very young as maybe 3, 4 years old, all the way to grandparents. And there aren't very many games that could be used for the entire family because if young people can participate, then let's say teenagers might get bored or parents might get bored. But life story seems to be pretty good um, for all ages. The basis of the game is something like the game Sorry, where you have like a little figurine that you have to move through a certain path, and depending on where you land, you have to draw a card and therefore piles with cards with different questions that refer to things such as how is your grandmother and your mother alike? Or if you can choose one place in the world to go, where that might be and why. Or what were some of the things that were happening on the kitchen table besides dinners in in your house when you were growing up? And of course, these questions are relevant to both children and parents because parents also were children and they can tell about some of the things that were happening in their life. Very useful for people to be able to share stories that might not be commonly known. Another one is working with pebbles, rocks, buttons, any kind of little objects, and ask every person to pick one for themselves or for another person in the family and tell you why that little pebble or button is associated with that person. Again, give a lot of information and helps them know more about each other. Also, you can work with sandbox and do all kinds of things there. Visual arts, that will be most frequently people use it, to draw, let's say, an image of the family. And from that image, you can infer a lot about the relationships between people in the family. Also, they can work on group projects, maybe draw a picture together and help them interact while they're doing this because they have to negotiate the space and the materials. And of course, there are all kinds of other therapeutic techniques, but the common theme is that it would be nice to facilitate interaction between the child and the parent, where you can model good behavior for the parent. You can show them how to communicate with their child in a more productive way, and also it gives you space to do something different from what they're already doing at home. And I think this is about time for questions. Um, I would be happy to answer whatever questions come up. Hopefully we'll have enough time. I don't know if I maybe so far I haven't seen any questions, but maybe I'm wrong. Again, are there any questions that have come so far?
I didn't see any questions in the chat box, but we will keep it open for a while. So please feel free to ask your questions in the chat. And meanwhile, I would like to take an opportunity and to say that if you want to receive a certificate of attendance of the webinar, please send us an email at this address. Just a second, I'm typing it in the chat. info@childhub.org, and we will send you the certificate. And also please have a look at our upcoming webinars. I will send you a link right now. Here it is. On the 8th of December, we are going to have a very interesting webinar on discussing sexuality with young people. Please have a look, and if the topic is interesting for you, please register and join us. And thank you very much, Denitsa, for your presentation. We will keep the webinar open for a while, so if we get any questions, we can answer them later. Thank you.
Also, I wanted to say, I think there's another poll coming up, the last one. Maybe if there are no questions, or while people are getting ready to type questions, maybe they can also answer the poll. It's the last one, I promise, and I would be very grateful for the answers provided in this poll. That would help me build a better presentation for next time. There's a question here whether the record would be available. I believe yes. Again, you probably can give more details, but my understanding is
Yes,
that it will be posted. Yeah.
The recording is going to be available in a few days, next week, I suppose. You can find it on the webinar page at the link above on the website.
I see here in one of the answers of the post, it says techniques. Probably that means someone is asking for more techniques to talk to the parents. I think. I'm not sure if I can give a short answer to this. Besides the reflective listening, the other techniques would get pretty difficult to share in the, in the remaining time. They're kind of more going into the therapeutic realm. But for the most part, the main rules are not to blame, not to judge. What does this mean? What does this mean? For example, if I tell you that you are stressing your child when you're doing XYZ, or that your child is stressed at home, then you might be thinking that actually I'm blaming you for providing stressful environment. Another way to say this might be that the child seems stressed out when he or she comes home. What is there in the home that might be interpreted as stressful for the child? So it's a very fine line, but it's important to distinguish whether we are talking about something that the parent is doing, or talking about a way to qualify or judge the behavior of the parent, labeling the behavior, versus talking about a particular event or behavior that is interpreted in a particular way by the child. or experienced that way, because we're not blaming them for being neglectful. We're not blaming them for whatever they have done as harmful behavior. We're simply talking about what is it that has an influence on the child? What is it that the child has interpreted as problematic, consciously or unconsciously? I don't know if that gives any clarification. Many people are having a hard time changing their words in such way. It's pretty much the same thing in personal interactions as well. Talking about what is it that I want, what is it that I feel, rather than what is it that you make me feel or you make me do. Let's see, there's some other questions here. Understanding the emotions behind the behavior. Oh, okay, so these are considered. These are not actually questions, they're things that have been helpful. Okay, well, thank you. Good to know. Did we have another question, Sophia, about the things that could be done differently? I think that's the second part of the same poll.
Sorry, Denise, can you repeat, please?
I think there was a second question, second part of the same poll. Do you hear me?
Not very well, sorry.
Okay, the poll has two
Yes.
parts.
Yes, sure, just a second.
Yeah, okay. So this one asks, what is it that you would recommend for the future? Maybe you have some suggestions how to improve the presentation. Maybe while we're waiting for the next couple of minutes, because someone mentioned that the example was helpful. I have one more that I was thinking to share if there's time. This is another mom and a child. Child is 13, 14, has been sexually abused by mom's boyfriend, and the mom is also a drug addict. And I was working with this family for a little bit. It's a good example of the use of the life stories game, because many times, especially when children are teenagers and the relationship between the parent and the child is not very good, it turns out that yeah, someone is asking for subtitles in the future. I don't know. That's a technical issue. So, so the mom and the kid, and they didn't want to talk to each other. They didn't really want to talk about any emotions. Didn't want to talk about the abuse. None of the important things were possible in these sessions. And we started playing the life stories game. And they started telling stories from their childhood. And then when the mom started sharing stories, in this process, it became clear that she was raped at the same age, the same way by the boyfriend of her own mother. And here I have two people, mom and daughter, both of them for the first time in years, finally talking to each other, both of them crying, hugging each other, and saying to each other how much they're sorry because they realize that they're sharing the same fate. Both of them raped by the boyfriend of the mother. Um, Another example of what it means, how a story that may look like, neglectful, bad parent turns out to be actually a suffering person who just couldn't do better, who has repeated their own story unknowingly, unintentionally. Yeah, I see many comments here about the quality of the audio. No, I'm really sorry about this. I don't know if there's anything um, I can offer to help with this.
It happens, then so don't worry. I mean, technology sometimes has surprises.
Mm,
Sorry.
yeah. Well,
Okay, so
um,
if we don't have any other questions, I would like to thank the participants for attending the webinar. And Denisa, thank you very much for your presentation. And I hope we will work together again in the future. Have a good
yes.
evening and a nice weekend.
Thank you very much for having me. By the way, I just saw someone posted that they would like to have the PowerPoint presentation online. To clarify, it will be posted online. If any can provide more details, I think the link that is
Yes.
shared. Yeah, go ahead, so I don't have to.
If you allow us to publish it on the Child Hub, we will do so.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for your time, for your attention. Thank you for having me today. Yeah, I will be happy to do something else in the future if that, is an option.